it's remarkable, and it is so unknown. But it is, like you said, it's so wonderful and multicultural. Allendale, there were people, it was full of immigrants,
Yeah,
who were thriving and had businesses, banks, theaters, all kinds of businesses. And those have been, you kind of have to go back to the city directories, which most people don't do very often, to get a sense of that community, that dynamic community with all these people from Sweden and Greece and Italy and France and Norway and Jewish people and Black people, and they were all living together and thriving. As you said, they were thriving.
Yes. Well, and you know, shout out to my grandmother Perkins, who has some papers with you guys, and
She does
she give historical tours through her lens, but she loved history and telling kids about history. We need more people like that who, you know, I don't know whatever happened to the Northwest Louisiana Historical Society.
It's still around, but it suffers from that same cultural bent, that they just take turns being the officers,
Right.
and
not going out and sharing it with the people, I guess. Because I you know, I know of one guy in town that's trying to do that with the Millennium Project.
The Millennium Project.
And, yeah, Chris Chandler.
Yes.
But other than that, there's really no, and a shout out to Robert Trudeau, who gives his historical tours of Shreveport. I did one of those tours just to check it out with some folks from Nebraska who were in town, high schoolers and their adult youth leaders. And what a great history. I still learned something new, but it was a pleasure for me to give tours of the municipal during lunch, just to strangers who were like, I've always heard about this place. And I'd say, well, come stand where Elvis stood, or here's where Hank's dressing room was, you know, and give them the tour and show them around. And they had this
where James Burton's building is across the street.
Well,
James Burton was a bigger star in Europe than Elvis Presley was.
Well, and then here we are today. We're trying to get past COVID and get a Lead Belly festival here. And why hasn't anyone ever done Lead Belly? There's a diminutive statue of him, but there's not like an international. I mean, they have done it here, but the same year that there was a Lead Belly festival in London and in New York, I met people down in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, who were Europeans, and they were there for the Black Pot Festival. I said, "What's that? And how'd you find out about it? I've never heard of it." And they said, "Oh, well, we, you know, read about it in the advertising in Europe. We've never advertised ourselves as the home to Lead Belly, the home of Hank, you know, outside." So at that moment, I had one of those very rare light bulb moments where I have a good idea. I was like, why haven't we advertised ourselves like Breaux Bridge does? They don't care if we come to the Black Pot Festival. They want Germans and Brits there. And I just think we miss out on so much because we suffer from a lack of leadership, which the other thing, and then I'll give you guys a chance to talk, but my other observation listening to this fascinating conversation is that as an accidental urbanist, new urbanist now, I didn't mean to be, I've learned that the way to lead a city is to go to the people who actually live in the city and say, what would you guys like? If you want to be Nashville with your incredibly rich history of country music, that's what we should do. Everybody would love that. Or if you want to be lead belly, and we have an incredibly rich history of African American entertainment here too. Maybe we should do both, and but instead they say, well, here's what we want y'all to buy into, and then they announce we're going to build a new project. We don't care if you like it or not, but we need you to finance it. We'll need you to back the bonds, and it'll be a wonderful project, and you can buy tickets to view our sports team inside of your new project that you've built. And everybody says, oh, and we move on.
Bringing up sports is actually an excellent, Steve, Elliot Stonecipher used to use the term frequently, and I don't even remember who. More than one person has claimed to be the originator of the term Shreveportitis.
Oh, that was Jim Montgomery came up with Shreveportitis in the journal.
Yeah, we have his papers too.
Yeah.
But I did an exhibit several years ago on the history of baseball in Shreveport. And it is as good a metaphor for Shreveportitis as any there is. And it's always amazing to me, after having done that people want to build a new stadium or revive baseball in Shreveport. And I think, why? We've never been able to sustain interest in it for more than a year or two at a time.
Come and check us out at allendalestrong.org. There you can find information about the events that we have sponsored and also our podcast. After you go to the website, come and check us out over at Facebook with the Friends of Allendale Strong. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, that's what I say.
And so we've done this over and over and over. And
how about football? We've had 2 pro sports football teams here that didn't work out. And then there's
baseball goes way back. Baseball goes all the way back to the 19th century. And we just keep doing it, and it keeps turning out the same way. It is throwing money at things like that make it impossible to do new things.
And now we've got an empty baseball stadium that sits there empty, and I call it a bat-aquarium because it's a huge colony of bats that we can't afford to remove them. We can't afford to raise the stadium and make that land productive again. And they still discuss bringing baseball back. I've worked for many of the semi-pro teams here that have been here, and there's no money in it. We won't go to it. And in fact, in these modern times, we won't sit outside on a hot summer evening and watch anything when we can sit in our living room and watch it on a huge screen. And it's real sports. It's the pros playing. And I can drink my own beer out of my own fridge for $6 instead of $6 a beer. So there's just no money in pro sports, except I really like those mud bugs. And I think that's just love. I think people who are into the mud bugs just love them and support them, including their owner. And so, good luck to them. But I've worked for football teams, baseball teams, and you never know for sure. You work on a weekly basis. You never know for sure if they'll be back next week with the paycheck to get you started on the next week.
I just kind of think that you have, if you look at Atlanta and people talk about, I stay here in the Atlanta area, and people talk about how Atlanta fans are not loyal. All right. They always say, oh, they're, Atlanta fans is, they're not loyal. They're not this and not that. But what keeps Atlanta teams in Atlanta are the suites, the business suites that occupy that top part and you pay 5 or 6,000, 10,000, sometimes even $30,000 a game just to have a suite, just to have people there just to impress. And that's what businesses do. You know, I go to the I'm a Atlanta United fan and a Braves fan, you know, and when I go to the games, you know, sometimes it may not even be, well, Atlanta United is always packed, but yeah, sometimes, you know, you go to a baseball game, there's barely anybody there. But guess what? All of those suites have been paid for. Every game sold out.
Yeah.
Right. You're not going to get a suite. You're not going to get any of those Lexus area seats. All of those seats are paid for through corporate sponsorships where they can write that off on their taxes. Who is buying the suites in Shreveport? That's the question. If you don't have somebody buying that suite, then you're not going to have a team, right?
Well, I'll tell you, because I worked, you know, when the basketball team that's now back to Mavericks, but when they won the world championship and folded 2 or 3 years ago, there was actually a study conducted by Hirsch to see if they could put suites in Hirsch, because it wasn't built in a time of suites, and it's just too expensive to put the suites in. So they sold special seating areas, and that was supported by SWEPCO and other, you know, the cable companies and that sort of thing. But they were empty. They didn't even have people sitting. You had the Mavericks winning the world championship of that basketball league and nobody in there. And I kept looking around the camera thinking, man, I hope they have the paychecks ready Friday. They're supposed to. And they did, probably not because of suites, but because of the similar best we can do. That's so Shreveport, you know. So then our captain's team winds up, you know, dropping down a few notches and moving to the Dallas area to Frisco. And so our former CAO was trying to sell us on back in the Saints guys D-League basketball endeavor here. And he said, we ought to be, if Frisco can have sports, why can't we? And it was like, because we can't afford the baseball team that moved to Frisco. Well, Frisco can, we can. You know?
I think that's part of the problem with the mindset here, is we want to have, you have to, the reason Frisco is successful, has been successful, is that there was something there. There was a foundation there to build on to support a team.
Right.
And we're trying to have the team first without the foundation, you know.
And in one of the poorest, you know, for the working class here, we're not a real wealthy part of the country. So we'll say, well, we serve 1.5 million people in the surrounding area, but they ain't got $15
exactly
plus $5 a beer when you can sit at home and watch it on a big screen color TV. So I knew guys, you know, working class guys, regular fellas that would say, do I buy the NBA package this month, you know, for the season, or should I buy the NFL package for the NFL season on cable? They're not thinking, man, I wish we had a D-League basketball team here and I'd go drink expensive beers. They're trying to budget for watching sports in the comfort of their living room, which is just where we are now. I think that's where we are with sports, except I got to give credit to the
Mudbugs.
Mudbugs are amazing for what they do. I don't really get hockey because I was born and raised here in the South and we didn't really ice skate a lot, but I appreciate the idea. But I used to go to the Shreveport Steamer games, you know, I was like, yeah. But after you do that enough times, and that's what I've tried to explain to our leaders, is you finally say, you know, this ain't going to happen and I'm not going to back your bond so you can pay yourself a huge salary to get wealthy and then bankrupt it and sell it to Frisco. I'm just not going to do that. I'll keep my money in my back pocket. Thank you very
So
much. And I
Laura,
think that really is Shreveport. Yeah.
yeah. So Laura, I have a quick question. Then we're gonna move on to another topic. I have a quick question, and you can answer it. I can cut this out. You can answer it or not answer it. But do you think we have leadership? We have a mayor, we have city councilman, we have all of that. But with the knowledge of Shreveport and the surrounding area, do you believe that just like that meeting they had in the 50s at the Times to say we're not going that route, do you think there is still that type of leadership here in the Shreveport area, in the surrounding area, that is still kind of pulling the strings on the decision making?
Yeah, a little different, and we probably are getting into some pretty touchy areas here.
Yeah. That's why you had to go deep.
But
Yeah.
but I think it's not on any one person or individuals in a group. But we have a couple of groups that are historic here. Their thinking has not changed very much.
Mhm.
And I would say that the Committee of 100, for example, has been around since the 19th century, that in many cities all over the country.
Mhm.
But I don't think the thinking has changed very much. And the same with the Chamber of Commerce. And I just, going back to my graduate education, I took a graduate class in Greek civilization. And I did it because I thought, well, if I'm going to study modern history, I need to have some idea of what it grew out of. And I remember the chapter in the textbook began talking about Sparta.
Hmm.
And he made the point in like the first paragraph of that chapter that Sparta is an example of what conservatism will get you, which is extinct. And it's really true. The world is not static. It is constantly changing, and you either have to be part of shaping that change, or you have to be kind of steamrolled by it. And I think that is the people who still control the power and the money have not been able to get out of a mindset that is over 50 years old now.
Yeah.
And I think you could say that. I don't think that Shreveport is particularly unique in that regard.
Yeah.
I think you could say that about a lot of communities and about, to a large extent, the United States. But if you're looking at what we need to do and how we need to grow our community, then that is the place we need to start. That mindset has got to change, because you just can't grow if your goal is to stay the same.
Yeah. I always say progressives and conservatives. Progressives drag conservatives forward, kicking and screaming. Mm-hmm. But the weight of having to drag the conservatives keep progressives from going a little bit too fast, right? Mm-hmm. Forward.
Well, I used to, when I was in high school, and my parents would badmouth the Kennedys. Kennedys were just terrible people. And and I would say, yeah, but it seems to me that we need a Ted Kennedy, to kind of balance the scale. Just like we need someone to say, there's a limit to what you can do without paying for it. There is also someone who needs to say, like you said, we have to move forward, kicking and screaming. Franklin Roosevelt was that person. And it was a moment in time when everyone else was so beaten down that they were willing to go along with it.
Yeah.
And I really honestly cannot imagine what America would have, well, we'd be speaking German. It just takes it takes some forward movement. There is no place in time where you can just sit.
Well, yeah.
Because you're either growing or you're going backwards.
Yeah. I always say that it's like inflation. Inflation always builds 2% on average. Some years it's less than 1, some years it's more than 2, but on average it's 2. But guess what? It's always going up. So if you're not making more than 2% a year, then you find yourself behind the times. You find yourself falling into poverty, and that's how I kind of look at it. I can really talk to you for about 2-3 hours, but I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, but I'm actually go into one of the reasons we have you here, and that is to talk about interviewing the people of Allendale and the projects that you have going on. Can you speak on those?
Yes, it is one of our strategic priorities for this next year. And I hope to build on it from there to start looking at community history and encouraging, not only helping people to learn more about their communities, but also to encourage them to preserve that history. And so we have a particular, I think, a pretty good documentation of the civil rights movement in Shreveport. And so in September the 29th, the campus is having an open, I don't think it's open to the public, but we're having an exhibit for the campus. Many of our students don't know much more history than kids that much younger on the civil rights movement in Shreveport. And it's just a small exhibit to show people how you learn history from looking at original sources, photographs, maps, letters, and speeches and things like that, and putting that together and reaching conclusions. Then with the Allendale specifically, that is our communities like that are so rich in history that history is not well documented. Mm-hmm. And so we want to do 2 things. We want to start interviewing the people who live there to tell their stories about the richness of their community and why it's important to them and why it's important to Shreveport. And then the second thing we want to do is next June, when school is out, we want to have a day camp that focuses on that history so that young people can come learn how to work with primary sources and learn research and come up with stories of their own about Allendale. And there will be in the future, there will be others. We did it for the first time this year. The students came and the topic was the Red River, the history of the Red River. We allow the students, we exposed them to some information. We took them on some site visits to different places on Red River and talked about the history of those places of memory. And then we let them choose what they wanted to research. One of them chose the dredging of the river. One of them chose the 1945 flood, which is what led to the flood control project. And one of them chose Jim Gardner's Red River plans. I thought they were very interesting topics for 13-year-olds, but they each developed their own exhibit with the materials they used. They each developed a poster presentation, and then they gave an oral presentation about their research and their topics. And it was amazing. And so I want to do that to raise awareness of the richness of the history of our communities. And Allendale, I think, is a wonderful place to start because it's one of the richest histories in our entire community and the least appreciated.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's going to NLCOG meetings that what has taken so long is that the Louisiana Office of Historic Preservation, State Office of Historic SHPO, has found more than 40 sites within that build alternative that NLCOG would like to build through. More than 40 historic sites there, and just over maybe 22 of them are so significant as to preclude a highway going through them. So then that throws it back. Now they have to figure out a way to get over, around whatever those historic sites. But had they looked at that first, you know, and read the 1966 Transportation Act, or had a lawyer read it and explain it to them, they might not have planned that route. But it gets into what the business community wants, and can we ram this through before people read everything and understand what they're dealing with. That's a very rich historic neighborhood. It goes back, you know,
Well,
to the Civil War, for instance, and you would think his Civil War historians would be up in arms about all of this, but they don't.
Well, it depends on the Civil War historian.
Yeah, right. But it's just amazing to me how they'll argue over saving a statue that was put up way after the Civil War. But I'm like, hey man, why don't you come down to Swepco Park and let me show you an actual Civil War site with earthen remains of a fort there. I don't have time for that. And you know, the way that marker of Governor Allen's house is down on the riverfront instead of at the location where he actually lived. Yeah, there's so many interesting stories. How did that marker find its way down to the riverfront and misidentify the riverfront as his home? I suspect that was during the civil rights era, that the story is the marker kept sinking into the mud and they decided to save the marker by moving it out of Allendale. But it's just such a sad that it's very frustrating. But thank you for your interest in Allendale's history. I had no idea until I became an accidental urbanist and then started learning about history and all of these wonderful things that I just really didn't know, even though my grandmother was Northwest Louisiana historical Perkins, but I just had no idea. And she certainly knew more that I just was a kid, you know, but I just had no idea, had absolutely no idea.
One of the other things that happens is that that when you don't document these underrepresented communities, neighborhoods, then people who are interested in it are going to tell their own story about it. And that's what I was referring to earlier about my my graduate dissertation and the book that came out of it, is that we tell our own stories. And after, for example, after the Civil War, Southerners did not write about the Civil War ever. There was a journalist at the Dallas Morning News who wrote a history of Texas in 1875. And in the entire book, it was about 300 pages. And in the entire book, there was one paragraph on the Civil War in 1875.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that it's imperative that we start doing these oral histories and capturing these memories of people of lived memories, of lived experiences, is that if we don't, then someone else will tell their story.
Right.
And that's all we'll know. I do have, there were some interviews done by some of the people who were instrumental in founding the archives in the mid 1970s, and they got a National Endowment for the Humanities grant to run an oral history program, and did about 200 interviews. And among those, there are a lot of them that are really interesting to explore, but one of them was with Don Hathaway, who was at the time on the, he was public service commissioner, I guess. And he talks about how they arrived at this route for I-49 in his interview. And the people in the community that he talked to and so forth. But what's clear now, then as well as now, is that the people who are giving the input are people who are giving input based on what they have personal stakes in, right? And that has a lot to do, I think, with what we're dealing with now. Is that this is under the guise of a community benefit, but that's not the real reason for the big push.
Yeah, but there's also, I hear it all the time, Perkins, you need to go ahead and be quiet because it's already been decided it's going through. And as if there was some smoke-filled dark room where the sons and a couple of daughters of that original C-100, which stands for Confederacy of 100 Dunces, to me. but where the C-100 decided where they're going to put it, and I would be interested to hear Don Hathaway's explanation. I can't wait to go read that, because how they decided it back then could have nothing to do with what would work today anyway. I just can't imagine what happened back
that
then.
was in the 70s.
Yeah, we just see, so many articles now about cities removing highways or burying them and capping them. Yet Shreveport can't wait to build, or Shreveport's leaders can't wait to build right through the.
When I go downtown, I go down Southern. Southern just tracks alongside I-49 all the way to town.
Which tracks along the railroad tracks.
Well, the thing is that before I-49, there were businesses all up and down Southern Avenue.
Yep.
And now there's nothing.
Right.
And I noticed when they came in a couple of years ago and planted some kind of plants, like maybe it was Asian jasmine or something, underneath the overpasses. And I thought, I wonder why they're doing that. Did they think with no sun and no rain, those plants are going to thrive?
Yeah, that's a classic government boondoggle. They threw more money, good money, after bad. I went before the previous mayor and council to ask them not to blow that kind of stupid money, but it's one of those deals where the feds gave the state money to beautify interstates, and the state gave it to the city if the city would match it. So we had to put up half of it, and you can't let that free money go. So you got to put up, so they blew like $1 million on plants to, as we say here in the South, put lipstick on the old pig. You know, it was because it turns out that that is a border vacuum, just as predicted in the 60s, where nothing will grow and no one wants to live there. No business can thrive and no one wants to live next to it. So the local businesses that are still somewhat surviving around the Kings Highway overpass said, please, this place is so ugly. Customers are running away from us. Can't you give us some beautification money? And so that money was sitting there. It was federal money. And if Shreveport put up, you know, say $500,000, they could get $500,000 of federal dollars that passed through the state's hands. So there you go. But I love to take people out and show them all the stuff that's along the highway that we did 20 or 30 years ago, and how nice all that $100,000 plants are. Or there's a lot of crepe myrtles. Yeah, it's horrible what they've done. They killed all those plants.
Well, those were never going to thrive anyway because they don't get watered.
Right. Nor do they get anything else.
So there's nothing. But Roosevelt, to go back to your question about our plans, I have a professorship thanks to Bill Weiner Jr. And so that day camp is, we can only take a limited number of kids, but I am offering scholarships to all of those kids out of my professorship, so that money is not a barrier to them coming and and doing this. And that's something I want everybody to know, that you don't have to have camp money in order to do it.
And you know, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are working with the community renewal, and community renewal. You know, we have friendship houses all over the place, and we have some children groups that meet up in the friendship house and meet up with the community renewal, and you know, it's a lot of things that we would like to get those neighborhood, those friendship houses all over Shreveport, and those kids that's all over Shreveport involved with learning about the history of Shreveport. You know, I did not know about the Little Union Church incident, and I call it the incident, but the Little Union Church incident, until I actually had a conversation with my mother. And I was probably in 11th grade. And then my 12th grade year, my baseball coach had a African-American history class at Booker T, and he told us about it. And everybody was looking around like, we didn't know anything about this. Those things, not just Little Union, learning about, you know, and Lieutenant Governor Antoine, you know, learning about
Luke Allen and the beginnings of Antioch Baptist Church and the Avenue Baptist Church, which was kind of an offshoot of Antioch Baptist Church congregation. They did amazing things. That what is the pastor's name there now? I can't think of it right now, but he asked me if I have pictures of the church, and I have the plans, the drawings of the church. It's a very historic building. But he said, well, do you have anything about the congregation? And I said, well, really, no. No, because nobody kept it. Nobody passed it on. I have come across some things now, but they're just amazing things that people were doing that no one knows they're doing. And when all you hear as a kid growing up is how oppressed your neighborhood was, then you don't you don't really realize how miraculous it was, and how many people worked so hard and did so many amazing things um, for you to be proud of. And so I think that we as a community need to capture some pride in our community.
Oh yeah. It that pride is always, people are different. People take pride in different things. I take pride in history. I take pride in looking back on history, learning the history, understanding the history. I take pride telling my kids that. So today I'm actually reading the book Robert E. Lee and Me.
Mm-hmm.
You heard of that one? And in one of the stories, he talks about how in a history book, 1956 57 history book that he found in the state of Virginia, and it showed a picture of an African American family getting off a boat, and they were dressed to the hilt, and they had all these nice clothes on with a nice top hat. That was their picture of the African slave trade. That was that picture.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm talking about with people making up their own stories.
Yeah.
And, you know, well, when I read W.B. Du Bois, book published in 1903, and I read it and think, well, gee, this could have been published yesterday, and it would be just as valid as it was then. Then, you know, it's time to change some things. It's time to look at this history and listen to it, because we're just living it all over again. As William Faulkner said, it's not even past.
Yeah. And wow. Yeah. Yeah. And right there, we're gonna leave it at that. Because like I said, I could talk. I literally can keep asking you questions and talk to you for another 3 hours. But
I will have to do that.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. I'm hey, you can, John already know. I can sit here and talk about history all day. And because I love it. I think that for me it shapes my thinking, and it shapes how I talk to my children about things. It shapes how I talk to other people about things, because I understand that history is a story of triumphs, but it's also a story of mistakes. And if you're not, I think what somebody said, if you failed and did not learn from that failure, then you miss the whole point of the failure. I hope I said that right. I probably jacked it up. But that's what history tells me. All right. I look at it as learning the failures, learning the triumphs, you know, and kind of understanding the human aspect of it. So, but yeah, I would literally can talk for another couple of hours. But do you have anything else that you want to put out there? You know, how somebody can be a part of the project, how somebody can contact you.
Um, we have 2 email addresses that people can contact us. The first one is mine, which is just my name, laura.mclemore@lsus.edu. The other one is just an archives email. It's libarchives, LIBARCHIVES @lsus.edu. And we have a website. We also have a website. Now, I'll go ahead and mention this. We can talk about it another time. We have a website that is not part of LSUS. It is the Handbook of North Louisiana. I got a grant from the Board of Regents a number of years ago when we got a big planetary scanner to do this. It's kind of an encyclopedia of North Louisiana history. And we're not looking to write the history of all of the rock stars. We are looking for just the people and the places and the events that make up North Louisiana history. That website is NWLA now I can't even think of it. Just Google handbook, online handbook of North Louisiana.
Is it, hold on, I think hold on, is it NWLA
That's it.
archives.org?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure I put that, because I've been to that site a couple of times already.
Yeah. I have a whole folder full of articles that need to be edited and published on the website. So there'll be more up later as I get to them. But that the reason that I mention it is not so much because of what's already on it, is that we are very welcoming of people who would like to write their own stories about history or about something they know about and send it to us, and we will put it on that website so that other people can find out about it. I think that there have been several initiatives like the Sankova Project that have done some of the same thing and have been very helpful, but we could do better. I mean, as a community, we could do better by just, it doesn't even have to be long. It can be 250, 500 words. But just if you know something, write about it and send it to me, and we'll get it up there so people will know about it. Probably a really good place to put some information about some of those historic sites in Allendale, for example, that John was talking about.
And we are, you know, William Hartman right now is working with Danielle on our website to put a lot of those historical places on the website so people can start looking at them. And then if we can turn around and, you know, add in your expertise into that also, that, I mean, and put links to your archive, you know, that would just, I mean, send it to the moon. So we're definitely going to talk again. We're definitely going to get with you. I actually have I have one person already that I'm talking to, a young lady that grew up in the Allendale area, and her grandmother moved to the Allendale area in the early, I want to say 40s and 50s. So we're definitely gonna, I have already told her, hey, I'm doing this interview. I want you to watch this because I want your grandmother to be a part of it.
Yes,
So
that is exactly the kind of people we need to be a part of it. The ones who still have the memories to tell us about.
yeah, definitely. So Laura, my God, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being a part of this. Like I said, we're definitely going to talk again. Don't leave yet. I'm gonna stop recording, but don't leave.
Okay.
But I'm just so happy to have you here with us. John, you have any last words?
Just a reminder to everybody that Charles Marone, founder of Strong Towns, will be in Shreveport September 22nd to speak in the evening. His new book will be out September 8th. You can order it, pre-order it online now at your favorite bookseller, and then come here and speak for free at First Presbyterian September 22nd. And then there's also a free seminar that Charles Marone will participate in, as well as others from Allendale Strong in the urban planning community here in Shreveport. That's free also at First Presbyterian on the next morning. So you can get your fill of Chuck Marone and his urban planning genius And I look forward to seeing you guys, Laura, and I always look forward to seeing you. Also look forward to seeing Roosevelt. I have no doubt that Chuck Marone will be in Atlanta probably before he makes it to Shreveport. Don't miss it. He's been interviewed by him. You should go say hello. But anyway, that's all I have. I really enjoyed this talk, Laura. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. So, you know, I'm definitely going to be a part of that. Hopefully, he has a Zoom or web connection that happens for that seminar. But you know, this episode is one of the reasons why I've done this. This episode is one of the reasons why, you know, me and John do this, is to talk about, you know, the history of Shreveport and how can Shreveport keep moving forward. So I want to thank Laura, thank John for hanging out with us today. And I also want to, you know, have everybody that is watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Everybody that's listening on the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, go to the website, go to allendalestrong.org. Also, go check out Miss Laura's website at nwla-archives.org. I will have links at the bottom of at the YouTube page, and I'm trying to put links on the website also. So from everybody at Allendale Strong, thank you and God bless. Have a blessed day.